Peak oil news, May 5th, 2022. Oil prices bounced up past 109 today, then settled to around 107 per barrel. This is quite significant in that the small bounce occurred in the face of a massive stock market crash. As you are likely aware, the Dow Jones took a huge beating today, dropping over 1,000 points. I would also remind everyone that these elevated prices in oil are occurring while much of China is locked down, which is surely deteriorating demand for oil there. Consider what the oil price action might look like if China was fully up and running. Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So why did oil prices stay buoyed while the rest of the market crashed? Well, for one, the Biden administration just seemed to make a complete U-turn from previous policy regarding the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. As many of you are likely aware, in mid-March, Biden announced that to relieve rising gas prices and the inflation that comes with them, they would be doing a massive release of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which would amount to 180 million barrels of crude over 6 months, or roughly 1 million barrels per day. However, today there was a leak from CNN that claimed the administration was seeking bids for a 60 million barrel purchase in Q3 of this year for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The sell low, buy high approach was lampooned in several conservative publications. The administration's statement on the move was that it was to replenish the depleted reserves and to create demand security for domestic oil producers. Part of me has to wonder if it is a subtle signal to the EU to rethink a total embargo of Russian oil. But that is pure speculation on my part, and perhaps I am overestimating the players involved. Just for some background on the SPR, it reached its maximum capacity of 714 million barrels under President Obama's first term. It has slowly been depleted since that time, mainly due to legislation that took place in 2015 that called for selling off some of the reserves to help fund the U.S. debt. During the oil glut of March 2020, when average oil prices were about $32 a barrel, then President Donald Trump did advocate for aggressively buying oil to replenish the reserve, but could not get the plan through Congress. The use of the reserve during price shocks and to fund the debt has led to the current reserve being about 549 million barrels at this day. If the current use of reserve oil to fund debt and government organizations continues, the supply could reach as low as 238 million barrels by 2028. The current SPR sites are also expected to be usable only until 2025. Our second story, OPEC promises to increase output of oil. But don't get too excited. First off, this isn't really an increase, as they have been promising to do this every month since October 2021 and had not been able to meet the monthly increase except for the month of February. And also, speaking of OPEC, the Senate Judiciary Committee has decided to move forward with legislation that will allow for the president to sue OPEC for manipulating the market and acting as a trust. The legislation is referred to as NOPEC. Now that the bill is out of committee, it is unknown whether it will see the light of day on the Senate floor or whether Joe Biden will eventually sign it. Opposition to NOPEC by major trading groups, including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the American Petroleum Institute, has intensified in recent weeks and months. They fear it could backfire on America's oil and gas industry and other U.S. interests. One thing is certain, it is hard to see how such legislation will help lead to warmer relationships between the current administration and the Saudi government. In the 2020 election campaign trail, President Joe Biden promised to make the Saudi crown prince a pariah in the international community. He has also ended U.S. support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen. All of these have led to an extremely difficult relationship, and in September, Crown Prince Mohammed reportedly shouted at White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan after the latter brought up the 2018 murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Longer-term consequences of the Russian oil embargo. Russia has seen its oil industry damaged by the economic sanctions and other responses of the EU and United States. By the end of April, it was producing 1 million barrels per day less than before the war. And according to officials at BP, this number might double by the end of May. Secretary General of OPEC, Mohammed Barkino, forecasted that the number could get as high as 7 million barrels per day. if a full EU oil embargo is enacted. Russia itself believes that its oil output will depreciate only by 2 million barrels per day, but this is still enough to have a lasting impact on global energy prices. Since the start of the war, some European countries started spurning Russian-supplied oil, forcing cargo ships full of the stuff to turn around and go back home. This quickly filled up spare storing capacity, and the only thing that could be done further was to idle some oil wells and limit production. Such idleness will often diminish total recoverable oil in a well. It also greatly hampers capital inflows. Worse than that, the exit of many big oil companies combined with the hindering of Russian financing through sanctions has made the continued exploration and development of Eastern Siberia oil resources less likely. This will have long-term implications for the global economy that will likely last after the current conflict has resolved.